Hey there, this is Dalton from Standard Capital, and I am here today with Sim.ai. This was the first investment that we did at Standard Capital, and so I'm excited to talk to the founders. Okay, guys, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, well, tell us, what does Sim do? What's your two-line description?
Yeah, so Sim is an open source platform to build agent workflows. So it's a Figma canvas where you can drag blocks and connect them to things like functions or integrations like Supabase or Slack. And then we also have a cursor style sidebar where you can build workflows in natural language.
Makes sense. And I want to dig in more on the product, but maybe to start with, tell us the backstory of the company. Like, when did you start? How did you get this thing off the ground? I'd love to hear the whole story.
Yeah, definitely. So Waleed and I were working on a previous startup, and it was a sales and marketing company. And our problem, what we realized was we had a massive agents.ts file with like thousands of agents. And even just between the two of us, we had like this coordination problem where we're like, oh, a new model came out. Like we wanted to try out GPT 4.1. And then we had to like Command Shift F, find like GPT 4.0 and like change the model to like 4.1. And we realized is like there's probably should be a better way to orchestrate these agent workflows. And especially because it was really hard even just to coordinate the amount of software, because this agents.ts file was like thousands of lines long. And we're like, there should be a better way to look at this in sort of some sort of visual environment.
You started with the original idea, then you moved to building agent orchestration. What were the dates there? When did you start it and when did you put it on GitHub?
I graduated from Berkeley, and the first thing I did was I called up Waleed, and this is sometime last August. He was working at Amazon at the time, at Ring, and I was fresh out of Berkeley, and he was a year older than me. We were best friends at Cal. And so I called him and I was like, hey, you want to come to SF and build a sales and marketing company? He's like, yeah, screw it, I'm in. So he just quit his job and moved to SF.
It took almost no convincing.
So he moved in with me and we were building this company. This is sometime last year. And then we applied to YC and we didn't get in, but I think it was a blessing because we really had no idea what we were doing. And we also had no real interest in building a sales and marketing platform. It was sort of like an AI powered CRM. And so I remember it was January 5th. And we were hacking on ideas, anything from like building logistics companies to like legal AI companies. And we realized we really knew nothing other than building these agent workflows. And so I was like, hey, what if we put something like a Figma and Jupyter Notebook, and like if they had a baby, what would that platform look like? And we were like, let's make it open source. And Waleed is like, all right. He's like, that sounds really dumb, but like, let's try it. And he was like, what's your goal with this project? And I was like, if we get to 100 GitHub stars, I'll be happy. And he was like, 100 is way too many. And I was like, you're right. If it gets to 10, I'll be satisfied. And so we started on January 5th. I think we applied to YC around a month later. And we had around 10 stars. And I think you were probably the 11th. And so we applied to YC. We were really surprised that we got in. Because we really had, no more than this idea of like, hey, we want to orchestrate these agents and some visual canvas, but it was nothing more than that. And when we started YC, we probably had around 50 GitHub stars, which was halfway to our success, I guess, when we started. And then, I remember coming into YC and we had our first office hours with you, and you really told us to like, just think bigger and to take this into a platform that could actually be monetizable, and it could be sold now to, thousands and hundreds of thousands of users. And we just crossed 60,000 developers on our platform, which we never would have thought was possible before.
Yeah, and what was interesting was when we were hacking on all these different ideas before we landed on Sim, like in transportation and logistics, real estate. I mean, we literally tried everything under the sun. But while we were doing this discovery, we were like, actually building agents is like 90% like an orchestration issue and less about like how you're prompting it at the time. In this discovery, we discovered like, if you wanted to build an agent for real estate or for transportation, it was actually a lot less different than you might assume. Like it's a completely separate domain, but at the end of the day, like you're just calling a model with some tools, maybe some form of memory, and then you can like make it more complex and chain together these agents that have like specialized capabilities. But really it was like more or less the same thing. So we were like, we need kind of like a playground where you can kind of swap out models. You can use smaller models, local models, have a bunch of different tools come in and out, something that manages all the OAuth for you. And that's kind of like also was a big part of the reason why we enjoyed using Sim ourselves. And kind of the North Star when we originally started building it was like, if we can build our entire previous company on just Sim, the platform, that was like a good benchmark for us.
Yeah.
And like we got to that pretty fast. I think like we were just thinking about everything from first principles. Like what are the basic building blocks? It's kind of like making a programming language. Like what are actually the most foundation blocks and things and abstractions you need, the minimal amount of like abstractions over the LLMs to kind of create any workflow. And we got to that pretty fast. So like we started building on, I think his first commit was like January 10th. It took a little bit of convincing for me. Like 5 days later, I started committing. But yeah, then we started building it. And I think like by the time we applied to YC, like we had the basic fundamental and building blocks there. And then from that point onwards, we kind of just spent the month before YC started just kind of building out the infrastructure. And I think like that really was like worth its weight in gold, because then when we started YC, we were able to just hit the ground running. And we didn't really have to like go back and like refactor a bunch of stuff and like lay the groundwork. We didn't have any scaling issues. So I think like that was a like good foresight from us that really, really paid off during YC.
Yeah, you guys, I remember, spent the whole batch just working on growth and distribution, which was the right thing to be working on. That's really good. I think I'd love to hear some of the case studies that you could share with folks about some of the most interesting or robust use cases of what people have built with Sim.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, now it ranges from massive legal services companies to the Department of Defense, all the way down to YC startups. But when we first got started in our apartment, we were hopping on calls with users. We had no idea that it'd be a monetizable platform, or that anyone actually would even get value outside of Waleed and I just building our old company on Sim. And so when we started, the first person that came was a gentleman named Alex, and he was a part of a company called Mobile Health. And they were a health insurance, or rather provider for all kinds of different health insurance and dental insurance for like large organizations. And what he wanted was a way for their company to basically have a chatbot with like all of their internal docs and show that to their users, where their users can ask questions about their health, and it has context of like their employer's plans and like their own insurance plan and like maybe their health, like current health status. And so that was kind of like the first use case that we saw that was like, wow, this can be something more than just a stupid sales and marketing startup. And then we kind of really saw a lot of super exciting use cases. And one of the ones that really excited me was a YC company from 2021, and they're called Business on Bot. And they're building everything from customer support to web research agents that basically research like company information and like figured out who were like the people that they should reach out to, and then also doing things like inside their product, like a dynamic experience for users. Like when they come onto the platform, the LLMs kind of curate the like parts of the features that they see. And so that was a really exciting use case for us, because we were ultimately wanting to build for companies like ourselves. And it was the first time that we found people that were similar, that were building their entire product on Sim. And so we're basically from that point onward, we're just looking for more and more users that were like this.
We work with a really large legal services company that does around 5 or 6 billion in revenue. And they did a survey internally in their company, and they said they spent around 60% of their total time, or their employees' total time, just monitoring emails, which was like a really big shocker to us, because like, I don't know, we thought that had already been automated. I think they tried some RPA in the past, but it didn't really work because of the ambiguity of the emails that were coming in. So they kind of needed a translation layer between this email client, where they had thousands of emails coming in and requesting for actions to be taken on this document processing platform that they use. So really quickly, we were able to show them a ton of value, because they came onto the platform, they set it up to pull their emails, and then they had like some small LLMs and some larger ones that kind of translated these queries that were coming into their email into like repeatable tasks that they could take on this document platform. So really fast, like we automated around like half of the total amount of time that they spend monitoring their email. And I know that translates to a lot more money than we're charging them, but regardless, it was really exciting for us to see how much value we could provide so fast. And I think the beauty of being open source as well is that we were able to like not bypass, but get really far along the procurement process without a lot of like the stuff that typically holds you back, like security audits and this stuff, because they basically came inbound. They saw the repository on GitHub. They were like, wow, this is super interesting. And they were able to get it deployed on-prem super fast. time kills all deals, right? So I think it was really like beneficial for us that like they were able to get it deployed and start using it immediately.
To shift gears a little bit, love to hear just your pitch for users out there. Look, there's a lot of action happening in agents, and people hear the term agents a lot. What's the ideal customer you're looking for, and who's best served by your product?
The user that benefits most from Sim is someone who's a slightly technical user who is not afraid of writing code, but just frankly doesn't want to write all the integrations and set up the environment to deploy their agent inside of. If you want to select a lot of different models and have like interoperability between all the different types of models, also if you want the option to run things locally and like just have a one-click deploy system, all these sorts of things that if you really get into the granular details of building agents, we want to provide that experience to everyone where people feel like it's not a visual canvas that we lose a lot of functionality in. The problem that we had with other visual canvases in the past and other workflow builder platforms is that they typically abstracted away a lot of the complexity. But the problem with that is that they also limit the users in terms of what's their capability. And so what we wanted to do is to make sure that everyone that comes onto the platform, it's the exact same feature set that you would have in writing code. It's just that in this visual canvas, so it's a much better environment. I think the second selling point for users to come to Sim is that we have an awesome copilot where you can basically type in natural language and it builds any workflow for you. And that's kind of state of the art and something that we've really, really focused on and fine-tuned over the last couple of months. And now we're super excited about it just because we've seen the power it delivers to users, technical and non-technical, to basically just type in natural language and build their entire workflow from scratch.
And the Copilot can even make suggestions on how people can reduce the cost of their workflows or reduce the latency. So it's super awesome. And now we kind of have that user data because there are 60,000 people on the platform. People are actively prompting this Copilot to build workflows for them and they can give feedback. So we kind of have a good like iteration loop where the Copilot's consistently like getting better and better. And it's like delivering results really fast.
I know one of your guys' big problems is you're hiring and you're looking for great candidates that want to work on this. So I'd love to hear kind of your pitch to folks out there for, if they might be interested or someone they know in working at Sim.
Yeah, definitely. For all the future Sims out there. And I think the thing that we say is that this isn't a 2-year journey. It's not even a 5-year journey or even maybe a 10-year journey. I think when we look back in the 90s at the birth of the internet, I'm sure that people in 1996, when JavaScript first came out and CSS and HTML, around 93, 94, 95, they had no idea. They couldn't even conceive the fact that we'd all be on Facebook, like meeting each other. And then now we're like the internet looks today. And I think the same thing will happen with AI. I think we can't even conceive the world, what it's going to look like in a decade from now. And the amazing thing is that if everyone's building on top of Sim, we kind of get to pioneer the way in which people use AI and that they deploy into their own production environments. And so I think that's a really exciting place to be because we want to be the platform of the future and we always want to be forward looking. And we're kind of fortunate because there are a lot of other platforms out there that maybe were like older or like perhaps have a lot more rules and restrictions around how they're able to like work and like pivot inside of the platform. But for us, like any new feature that comes out, like we're always reading like the latest research papers and like the latest model advancements that come out. We always want to put that in the platform and find a really exciting use case around it. So this field is like ever changing and dynamic, and we just want people who are part of the company to feel like they're pioneering the future of AI, which we surely feel like we are in the process of.
One thing that's cool is you guys are open source, so interested candidates can just go read the repo and get a sense of what the tech stack looks like and how it all works. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good selling.
Yeah,
That's a super easy way to catch our attention as well. Like we're constantly surveying like who the contributors are to the platform. And I think like that's the best way if you wanted to like engage with us in any way and not just be like another applicant on the careers page. The best way is to like start engaging with the repository, contributing. And we really made it like super extendable from day one. So we have a ton of integrations, like 100 of them out of the box. But I think like a common first feature that somebody makes is like they add a new block or a new tool. And I think like that's just been like a super easy way for them to get our attention.
Yeah, so anyone that's definitely interested in open source projects, we're one of the fastest growing open source projects in the world. We joked about earlier how we never expected to be at 100 GitHub stars, and now we're at like 17,500, which is even like When we ended YC a couple months ago, we were only like 4,000. So who knows where we're going from here? But definitely people who are interested in open source projects, we really appreciate the developer community and the fact that we are open source and developers around the world can contribute to the project and also run it locally, without us intervening in them building agents.
One thing we've talked about in the past that I'd love for you guys to talk about here is just kind of your vision for what the future of the space looks like and what does software engineering turn into and agents. Like, I know you have strong opinions on this. I'd love for you to share that.
One of the things that we really hated, truthfully, when we first started Sim was all of these SDKs and frameworks to build agents, but there were sort of all these unnecessary abstractions like role and backstory and using this type of memory or that type of memory. And we really felt like we needed to get back to the core of building agents, which was basically just looking at the documentation that OpenAI and Anthropic and Gemini were producing. It's almost like if Postman had built their platform and instead of URL and headers and query parameters, they named it like name and backstory and role. That's like basically what's happening right now in the agent world. And what we figured is like we just want to stay as close to the model providers as possible, but also be agnostic. We want to basically allow for anyone to build agents to use Anthropic models, to use OpenAI models, to use Gemini models, to use Qwen models, and to run it locally and to run, so we wanted it to be this open platform and this open interface. Whereas I think a lot of the other platforms or builders in the space take a lot of opinions. And we sort of wanted to be this root layer where we're completely unopinionated. And if you want to come into Sim and build an agent, it's completely interoperable with any other platform or any other framework. And so that was kind of the point of building Sim.
And you build your workflow and you deploy it as an API, and then it's kind of super portable in that way too. Like you can kind of take it and plug it into your system. We support streaming on the API. We also have a ton of other things out of the box that typically people have to build kind of scaffolding around the model providers when they roll it themselves, like guardrails and memory. Like memory is not an inherent quality of LLMs. So they typically have to use like a memory provider. But like we have these like building blocks that you can use to kind of wrap your LLM and add a lot of like added functionality that people would typically need to add themselves.
Okay, sounds great. So I guess last topic here is, as I said in the beginning, you guys are the first investment we made at Standard Capital. And I think you guys are a great case study for the kind of company that we want to fund. You're fast moving, you're certainly AI native. I think you guys are great members of the community. Like obviously I worked with you at YC and I know how well you were respected by the other founders in the batch and how helpful you were. And so you seem like a great fit for what we want to build with Standard Capital. And so when you think about it, for some of the folks watching, is part of the pitch to them on why they might want to apply to Standard Capital is to get to know you guys and get to work with you and learn from each other. So I'd love to know kind of what your guys' thinking is, or like what appealed to you about this versus other options when you were fundraising.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll go first and you can go after. But I think obviously we knew you from YC and we were like, wow, more opportunities to hang out with Dalton. Like, great. No, I think seriously, we had a lot of founder friends who were in much later stages than us, like Series B, Series C, Series D. And the one thing everyone always talked about is how these board meetings went and how they had all these board members they more or less didn't like. And how they kind of talked about there's this like environment where these like startups and the venture community is like, there's this sort of like big disconnect. And then they always meet at these board meetings. And at these board meetings, there's like all these things that happen, like people get fired and there's like make all these decisions. And so I really love the YC spirit. And I think Waleed and I both like YC was one of my like probably one of my favorite experiences I've done in my life maybe. And it was just so cool. And it's like, wow, we get to extend that even further. And I remember we were kind of getting close to the batch ending. And I was like, man, I feel like really sad that we're ending YC because I feel like this loving and like strong community of people who just want to build and move faster and help each other. And now you're kind of like out there in the open. And so when you told us about Standard, we were like, oh, wow, like we actually get to be a part of another community that's sort of just like an extension of YC, where you have all the same like help and support. And also I feel like just love and passion for building companies and building a startup. So from the start, of course, like we would take any opportunity to work with you. But I think, the point of Standard really stood out to us as being like something that's basically YC adjacent just for later stage YC companies. And obviously not only companies that are in YC, but bringing that same energy that YC brought to startups at the early stages to just a little bit later stages. So I think that was like what really excited me personally about Standard.
Yeah, and I think like you mentioned in your pitch for us to Standard, that like it was super founder first. I think like the experience that I got in YC was that like I did the most learning when I was talking to other founders in the batch, like how they were selling, how they were building. Everyone just has like so much passion about what they're building. Like you just learn a ton about every part of the stack, like technical, selling, just like across the board. So I think it's just great that like we get to learn from other founders who have also been doing this for a while, and like maybe they're a little bit farther along than us. So we have a lot of learning to do from them. And I think like we've done some things that are like pretty unique. Obviously, like we get to feed back into this community that's just like ever growing. And obviously, I think like the absolute number of companies in Standard is so much smaller than YC, which makes it great because you really get to know people on a personal level. And like you guys really get to help us as well, like on a more granular level. We're really looking forward to like getting to know the other founders.
Well, we're so excited that you're part of it. Again, you're part of the creation story of this thing. And you know, again, your startup is doing great, and it was so great working with you before. We're excited for you to be a part of Standard. And you know, going back to the audience here, this should just give you a flavor for kind of what Sim is all about, what the founders are all about, and what we're trying to do. So thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having
you.
us.
Really
Dalton.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.